I'm BrianVee, and this is Why We Work. And I have the great pleasure of interviewing Cristian Moreno. Good day, fine sir.
Well, good day to you and to all the people that actually get to watch this. I'm very happy to get the chance to be here. A bit late, I must say, but hey, I made it.
No, you were not late at all. You were what do you have there now? 8, 7, 8, 9 o'clock
8:03.
at night, and I'm only the wee or 7 o'clock in the morning, 8, maybe it might be 9 now. So our family is just getting going here in August, being kind of vacation time. So you're
Nice.
not hindering me at all, and it was
That's
probably
good to
good so I can help get the family going.
know.
So,
Great.
Cristian, I thank you for coming here. And again, I always feel a little bit obligated to mention we met through LinkedIn. And I
Yeah.
find that to be a great resource for people trying to make connections in whatever field and whatever they're trying to do, if it's innovation, podcasting, commentating, any sort of industry seems to be out there. Um,
Right.
can you talk about your experience with LinkedIn for a moment?
Well, I wouldn't say I joined LinkedIn, maybe 7 years ago or
Mm-hmm.
so, 6, 7 years. Sounds about right. I must say, I find it very interesting what the platform actually brings to the table in contrast to what you were saying. It's really, really efficient. It's a very practical layout. You don't have the complications that necessarily other platforms that job seeking, if anything, might present. This feels like I find it sometimes if you're in a job application or whatever, you
Mm-hmm.
might see that you get it through social media, and they classify any and every of these type of, let's say, similar platforms. But I feel
Yes.
like LinkedIn, in many ways, and I'm not the expert in
Yeah.
that area, but from what I've seen, LinkedIn is the one that's much more personalized as far as the layout of a social media without
Mm-hmm.
compromising the efficiency for
Very
the
good.
job seeking purpose.
Very good. I agree with you. It's been good. I've only been on it a few weeks or a month or so, but it's proven to be helpful at the
Yeah,
very least. Can you go
really.
back, Kristen? And we're talking here at Why We Work
Yeah,
about work and how we get on our journey in life. And I'd like to talk a little bit later about what you're doing now. But can you maybe give us a little, where you're from and your first job and how old you were when you first start working?
sure. Well, I'm Dominican, the great island Dominican Republic, and hence precisely why you're seeing this background.
It's beautiful
uh
background.
yeah, man. So pretty much, I've been in the business for a good 14 years now. It seems like it would be yesterday, 14 plus actually. And it all began precisely when I was in my cradle, literally. Uh, I pretty much have been into sports since I was a baby. And you might even say it's my genes. My dad was very big and into some sports, especially much more so, unsurprisingly so, to baseball.
Mm-hmm.
But my introduction to sports came through my auntie grandma. That she was precisely the one that would take care of me when my mom was working.
Mm-hmm.
So she was very, 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 very much enticing and energetic as you can be with her teams. Especially the gravitas for her would be in basketball and baseball. So my introduction was to the basketball that was locally, the level of basketball. Still, when I was growing up, that was kind of like the exit, if anything, of the higher level.
Mm-hmm.
The 70s and through the 90s, I like to think, in unbiased opinion, there was a fair amount of Latino players that had the NBA potential,
Mm-hmm.
but there was not the inclusiveness yet that legitimately came when the NBA acknowledged that, hey, we can't only market one player because then Jordan will retire 7 million times and we have no backup. And obviously they started the kickoff. So the
Mm-hmm.
level of basketball was very big in the Dominican, in Argentina, Puerto Rico, Brazil. In the Dominican, I think it's never picked up as high as it was, especially in that time. Not that it's not good now; it's good, but back then, again, I think we could have had a good amount of NBA level players. And in baseball, obviously, winter ball also was much more competitive back in the
Mm-hmm.
day. You still had a lot of players that were going back with big cartel names, if anything. I mean, since the money was not as big still back then, you had an emergence of names that you go like, wow. I mean, heck, it was only in 1983, years before I was born, that the dollar and the Dominican peso start being on par.
Mm-hmm.
And you had some players that they would make more money going to play down there a few months, half the time they would
Mm-hmm.
actually play in MLB. So it made a lot of financial sense as well, not to mention the amenities and commodities they obviously got to enjoy. So yeah, I got a lot of good quality basketball and baseball to begin my journey as a baby. And I ended up moving to New York when I was 8. That served me very well as far as including much more the beyond casual fan to other sports. And I started pretty much jumping into all the other sports. It was
Mm-hmm.
great. I mean, you were fed, especially local TV being as big as it was back in the day. As much as many people would not understand that nowadays, especially the kids. But
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
local TV was huge. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
all that you got, the boxing fights, the soccer, everything that was all around. Of course, the great New York Giants in the '90s and so forth. So I was fed a lot of great things. And I think it was pretty much putting two and two together and actually acknowledging its four. I wanted to play, but that was not necessarily going to be always viable. I have a deficiency, and that does not hurt me in whatsoever for a normal life in my quads. I don't produce the same level of calcium. Maybe later in life when I age, that might be an issue, whatnot. But for a normal life, if anything, I train well in the gym. I don't have chicken legs, thankfully, and whatnot. So it doesn't affect in that regard. But I could never actually step it up to the point that you actually need if you want to go pro, which you really have to go through that because
Mm-hmm.
I would just get exhausted from my knees eventually. So it was like I didn't have that health enough to actually make that extra push. So it really it's frustrating because you love something so much, especially because I played multiple sports and I was pretty good at them, but never could you actually cross that bridge. So it came to be okay. What do you want to do that still keeps you in the field of something you actually love?
So
And
sorry, Kristen. When you were 8 years old, you went to the United States. What was the
that's correct.
reasoning? Obviously, it wasn't your sole purpose. It was probably your
Yeah.
parents or grandparents. What
Yeah.
was the sole reasoning for going over or coming over?
So it was precisely 1995,
Okay.
August, right around this time back in 95.
And you were 8 at the time, yes?
Yeah, and I want to say it was, heck, maybe right around these days. I think maybe August 18th,
Mm-hmm.
95
Mm-hmm.
might have been, if memory serves me
Do
well.
you remember like this big move, like some sort of transition at that time?
I mean, as a kid, I guess you don't soak in as
So
much as
yeah.
what it's gonna mean
Mm-hmm.
in so many ways. It is kind of weird because you do acknowledge that you're gonna be away from the friends you might have, the
Mm-hmm.
family and whatnot. But I guess it doesn't hit you that strong still in
Mm-hmm.
that period. I did obviously notice, oh well, I'm gonna be away. But again, it doesn't hit you as hard as it might a tat
Mm-hmm.
later. You
Mm-hmm.
haven't maybe developed those stronger bonds.
Mm-hmm.
And obviously, it was pretty much trying to seek a better quality of life. Indeed, thankfully, we were able to arrive and everything. We already had everything legally documented through the family per
Mm-hmm.
se that
Mm-hmm.
came from my grandma itself. She
Yeah.
actually inquired for us and whatnot. So it was an easy process in difference to other immigrants that unfortunately life actually just stems them to have
Yeah,
to
yeah.
try for any other methods. And like I feel for them and I understand them. If I would be in said circumstance, it's like it's one of the it's like the steroid scandals. It's like, if you would be on their shoes, you probably would do exactly the same thing if we're going to be straight up honest. So it
Well,
came
no,
down
as you
to
say
that.
that, I think it's a point that we shouldn't move over. I say
Yeah.
that a lot about, you know, leaders of countries or, whatever it is. Like
Mhm.
especially if you were born into the family and then you become, whatever you want to call it, the god of that country. If you were in
Right.
the same shoes, you might find yourself doing a very similar thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like if you're surrounded by that culture, I mean, it's hard for someone to grasp and say, "Oh, yes, I would do that thing." But if from infancy, if you're brought up a certain way, or like in the baseball culture at that time, whatever
Yeah.
it is, if you're surrounded by it, that temptation is there. And if not, there was nothing else that you would have known to do.
Right. I mean, it's one of those things, and since you actually made the mention to baseball, unfortunately, the Dominican has as many. I even had this conversation not long ago, in this decade, definitely with a Venezuelan friend. I was like, hey, I mean, you guys had a great with petroleum and everything, but in many ways, the Dominican, the only reason where poverty actually presents itself as the level it does is because of the political corruption that has existed throughout the passing of time. Because when you actually see all the resources we
Mm,
have there, it shouldn't make any type of sense that the country is in the state and level of poverty levels that actually does present. So that has been a tie indirectly. Also, that has been hand in hand with something that I think a lot of these people, when they actually are judgmental, they don't take into consideration. I'm not justifying uncontrolled birth populations,
mhm.
but the Dominican does have that situation. And, it's like, it's one of those situations. If your brother number, I don't know, 8 of 12 or whatever, are you really going to think, oh, my morale and whatnot, it's going to be compromised if I use these steroids? No, you're actually just going to think what's best for your family, and
Mhm.
you're going to go ahead and use it. It's very easy to sit in a desk very far away and maybe be formerly from Stanford, Yale, whatever, and have these strong opinions without actually being familiar to the instance. I'm not
Mhm.
justifying it,
Yeah, yeah.
but I'm just saying if we be in those shoes, we
Mhm.
probably do the same,
Yeah,
if not
I
worse.
agree. Yeah, if not worse. I think that's
Yeah.
people are like, "Oh no, I would never do that."
You have to
Really?
be in the shoes.
Really?
It's like you got to
If
be.
I was a
In my
baseball player
case,
back in the day, I'd be like double fisting steroids. I mean, this is just my
right?
character. Like, what do you mean?
Yeah.
This stuff's gonna make me a few million and I'm gonna, win some batting titles?
Did you see the 30 for 30 that ESPN put out of Sammy and McGuire?
I believe a while ago, yes.
So I had a conversation with a fellow countryman, and he understood the documentary totally incorrect from what it was.
Mhm.
And he was like, "Oh, I mean, Sammy Sosa was the spearhead to actually lifting baseball. Why did McGuire get much more screen time? That's discrimination and whatnot." And I was like, "You really don't get it. Listen, let me give you my opinion, being in the industry, so you can actually understand what happened in the
Mhm.
documentary.
Mhm.
What happened in the documentary is what follows. Yes, McGuire was the mostly featured. The runtime for him was much more. Now you have to take into account why. First, McGuire was halfway is actually being very considerate, destroyed in the documentary. He was pretty much presented as bad as you can present someone.
Mhm.
Sosa, on the other hand, even though he has less runtime, as I was expecting, he was totally protected in the documentary. It was very visible that he controlled the questions that he was going to answer and that
Mhm.
he was going to be very specific on what he was going to state. At the end, when the documentary is actually finishing up, he actually says something that he said it sometimes throughout the passing of times, but sometimes you can say something and you can either hear or listen. You choose which one you do. And he tells you straight up, I don't know why I'm actually being chased so much because of something that everyone was doing, and they
Mm-hmm.
chased me so much.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like,
Yeah.
okay. I mean, you still have people giving positive today where
Yeah.
they're super technology. So it's like, okay. So that's the thing. And I think you always have to see things as much as you can unbiased.
Yeah.
Because
From
it's
their
like, if you see
perspective
that
as much.
documentary,
Yeah.
I take documentary for anything in life.
Mm-hmm.
If you only see it, I'm going to be hurt because my countryman was not. It's like, no, on the contrary, he was a big winner. He was presented. He is possibly, if not the most charismatic player we've seen, top 3 for sure all time. But he was very well guarded and protected. It was like he was almost like Hulk Hogan to go a bit into wrestling protected levels. It's like, no, you have to put yourself in the other seat so you can actually have a better view. And that applies to anything and everything. You always have to see everything from every perspective. That applies to any avenue of life.
I agree, Christian. And this is how this podcast works, is to get into your shoes and to
Yeah.
understand your perspective, to give the encouragement to others. Because we don't always have to, I mean, we don't need famous people to learn lessons.
Oh,
So
no. On the
when you
contrary.
came over to the States when you were 8, and then you were still active in sports, did you find yourself, when did you get a job? Like start paying and working job? What was your first job that you had?
So, job per se, I guess it would just depend on the formalities of how we would actually classify it. One thing that I always had
Yeah.
since very early on, I always had a very, very businessman approach to
Yeah.
life.
Mm-hmm.
So, I did a lot of small time things, if anything. Like I, I would sell juice during the summers, and I would up the prices
How old were you?
legitimately.
No, those are great things. Like those should never be, because I hope there's some kids that listen. My
Yeah.
kids listen and say, "Hey, I can sell this. I can do
Oh
this.
yeah.
I can make some money."
Yeah.
And
Oh
learn
yeah.
the value of it. How old were you when you were selling juice?
I was that was 97, so I was 9 or 10 or whatever.
I mean,
Uh,
let's be clear. You were just talking about baseball. It wasn't the juice. Right.
yeah, not that juice.
Not that juice.
Not the consecutive juice.
Right? The kid, you had lineups around the block.
yeah.
These kids came back bold.
like, oh, that's some growth.
No, that's great.
No.
Like 9 or 10 selling juice.
Yeah.
That's what I'm talking about. Not like, okay, legally I'm supposed to work here at 17 or
Right.
18 from this hour, this hour. I want, like, when were you making money and what was driving you to do that?
And here's the thing. I did that. I also had well, I mean, nowadays you don't get those as much, but there was a comic book store that also used to sell trading cards.
Yep, same in my area
So
too. Yeah.
I used to, especially around that time when Pokemon actually went big.
Mm-hmm.
So I would buy both sports trading cards and the Pokemon cards.
Mm-hmm.
And I would pretty much go ahead and take a look at the trends on how they
Mm-hmm.
work. And I would upscale that price significantly. Now, the funny thing is, where was I actually getting the money? I'm a child to a single mother.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So what I was doing, I would actually pay attention to everyone that drank beer
Yeah.
in the building. And let's just say that our Puerto Rican neighbors, they definitely like one particular brand a lot, and they
Uh-huh.
drink it
Uh-huh.
with a lot of religiousness. So I would actually take attention and just pretty much look when they would actually pick their garbage out. And the thing is that I haven't seen those machines around forever. You remember those recycling machines? I had a C-Town in New York supermarket. I would take it, and they would pay you for recycling.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's been forever and ever, and probably when they noticed that there was probably people that were making somewhat money.
More than they expected.
Yeah, and they pretty much knocked the idea out.
So what was the
But
machine? What was the
What
machine?
the machine would pay you depending on the type of thing you took. If it was a 2-liter bottle or a
Yeah.
small can of beer, whatever it was, you know. So depending on the one you actually sent, it would pay you. But at that point, you would get paid as much as $1 sometimes. If you actually took like a 2 or 3 liter,
Yeah.
I think it was like a buck or $1.25 at one
Mm-hmm.
point or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And the cans, I think it was like 50 cents, whatever.
So sorry, are you gathering the bottles and then bringing them to this
I'm paying
machine?
attention to
Yeah.
when they pick their garbage out.
Yeah.
So I'm just pretty much taking the bags because they would leave it out
Yeah. So
in
you're
that building.
grabbing
The
their
landlord would
you're gra-
actually grab the garbage from the people that didn't throw them in the bin.
yeah, yeah.
So what I would do is I knew what time the landlord would actually do so. I would actually go ahead and scale ahead, boom. And there I would go. The Sea-Town was relatively close, like 3-4 blocks away,
Yeah.
short block. So boom, I would go ahead. And
How old
that's
were
where I
you
was
at this
getting.
time?
Yeah, that's around that time when I was
Same
selling
11?
shoes and the trading cards and everything. That's where I was getting my capital from. And my mom actually tells me, where did you get the money from? Which was one of those questions that obviously, and especially in the
Yeah.
90s still,
Yeah. Yeah.
in New York, as a parent, I can't imagine how,
You
freaked out you must be if your kid actually,
coming home with money.
yeah, it's like people that didn't live in New York or are not privy to late 2000s.
Mm-hmm.
It was not the most friendly environment. So
Uh-huh.
your parent could actually panic if you were
Yeah.
suddenly bringing money. But
You get
yeah, man, it was
cash.
like I would find any and every way that
Mm-hmm.
actually came to mind from the trends that I would actually be seeing just by socializing. We return to the same thing, social interaction. And I would see what was trending around the kids. I did the same with video games too and whatnot. And depending on how valuable it was, I would actually just make my profit upscaling the price a tad more. And especially because the thing was, uh, a lot of times you could actually play around because it wasn't the info era, and you could be like, "Oh, you're not going to find this in any store."
Yeah.
I got the last
You
one.
can
And
upsell it
kids, it's
yourself.
like they're not
Yeah.
going to check.
Yeah.
But it was fun, definitely, man. It was fun and it was great. And the thing is, in the end, I was just I would stay with a part of the money just to reinvest, but I was giving the loan sum of it to my mom, who a lot of the values that I fortunately do have, I probably inherited from her. But like many other, especially single parents, she had 2, 3 jobs, whatever, and pretty much was hustling into it.
So yeah, I was gonna say so your mom was working, same as mine, right? And I've talked to a couple of people now that, grew up in single family homes and the mom is working a lot. And it usually tends to fall on the mom. So,
Right.
so did you recognize that at 11? You were giving your money to your mom, but you just, at 8, you just moved there and then your mom's working to make ends meet. And
Yeah.
then you're finding you're getting these new desires, right? At 10, 11, you want some money and that's taxing on your mom. So are you thinking, I need to help my mom at this point, like even at 11?
Yeah, because the thing was, I really, through the vast majority of my life, the relationship with my dad, it was not the best. I actually met him just, I want to say days, maybe less than a week or a week before we were actually set to move to New York. He was just
Mm-hmm.
coming back.
Mm-hmm.
So, from the get go, he had many things that he actually had to figure out in his life, which fortunately, close to the last 5 years of his life, I finally was able to feel proud of him in many ways.
Mm-hmm.
And even in distance, I kind of finally started building a relationship with him. So I always got to see the struggles from my mom. She had me very young. She was 21 when she actually gave birth to me.
Mm-hmm.
So she pretty much had to drop out and whatnot and just go at it in life and in the strong way. So, like materialistically, I didn't have like all the things, the ideal home, if anything, whatnot. But I wouldn't trade it for anything alive, because I ended up getting much more of the valuable things that I think some parents forget, that when you actually give that love,
Mhm.
fundamentally, that education, that core value and whatnot, that's the most important thing. So I always had an appreciation for that from the very get-go, and I would never trade it, because it really made me have a very different perspective. And I'll use the cliche: I had to grow up fast, whatever.
Yep.
But it was never tough to actually relay that money to her. And on the contrary, it's like, uh, thank you so much for all those neighbors that were actually dropping beers.
No, that's
Hey,
great. I mean, that's
I
nice.
think it's not too surprising that then you actually got Stone Cold Steve Austin, one of my very best favorite wrestlers.
Mhm.
Speaking about the '90s, although I'm actually wearing a Just Bring It The Rock T-shirt, so that feels kind of awkward. Throwback Thursday, man.
After you were doing some hustle with the bottles and the
Yeah.
juice, but great at the age of 11, and did you keep any of those cards? Do you still have
If I kept,
any
if I
of the
kept what?
playing cards, Pokemon cards? Do you still have any
I still
tucked
have.
away?
Yeah, yeah. Because the thing is, like, uh, I've always been very, very, very conservative of everything, and I think that when you have less, and you're shown to actually have values, I always took a lot of care of all the things I actually had,
Mhm.
and I pretty much grew up like that, and I'm like that till this day. Like, plus I don't have vanity, so even though I have this career in the industry and whatnot, like in my house, like I was laughing the other day, because like I just now got into the QLED technology for TVs and whatnot, and it was all just because the TVs I had finally actually ran their way through. So
You took
uh,
care of them for a long period of time without getting into.
as in everything, like
Yeah.
vanity, nah, no. So I always had that. I still have from the Pokemon cards. I have both the deck that I endured much more, and I have a lot. I tuned out of the Pokemon whenever they were in the second generation. I
Mhm.
don't even know how many actually have spanned, but
Mhm.
I have all those cards from then, and of course from baseball, my collection, uh, uh, just like from all other sports, it's very big and it's very well taken care of.
And I won't even have to tell you, but keep them. I think there's a little bit of a surge going on with even
I
Pokemon and sports cards nowadays.
I I was educated on that trading card world. I must admit, I thought I knew, and then I noticed I didn't.
Mhm.
So I have a friend that has a very, very high valuable collection of sports memorabilia, and like you would expect that the Babe Ruth, the Lou Gehrig's, Willie
Mhm.
Mays, and all that. Anyone that doesn't know too much, the Wilt Chamberlain and all that, those would be like highly valuable, the most valuable cards. And this guy actually took me to school, if anything, on that. And he showed me, especially much more so with baseball, the rookie cards is where the business is biggest.
Mhm.
I was like, what? I mean, the guy hasn't even played yet. What's
Mhm.
so valuable a rookie card? I was
Mhm.
totally ignorant.
Yeah.
Ignoramus,
They
the
hadn't proved
quote
themselves yet.
Eminem.
Why would it be so valuable? Yeah.
And then he actually goes, "Oh, you want to see?" He pulls out at that moment. I don't know if you saw on the news that Mike Trout card that actually sold, the diamond rookie card of Mike Trout, sold way over $500,000 recently. I think like 2 months ago. When he showed me that, it was like at that was like 5, 6 years ago. It would
Mhm.
have been like at a 340, something like that range. And I'm like, what? I mean, is this Photoshop or what? He's like, no, this is the legit page of trading. And he started showing me, and I actually understood that business. The thing is, they precisely do the rookie cards is they take the MLB top 100 prospects, right? And this is part of the good and the bad from that type of business.
Mm-hmm.
Because the valuable rookie cards need to be from prospects that are in that top 100, which actually will show me into the next part of the story I actually have for that. So he started showing me prices, and it's like the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
It's like this kid, Brent Honeywell, that was slated to be like the next big thing from the Rays. I remember we had him in Marlins Park with the All-Star game. He got into trouble, injuries, like a bunch of things. So I remember that when he was getting hyped, his rookie card got to a point where it went up like the $680, something like that. When he was after the All-Star game, it jumped like from $30 to that.
Mm-hmm.
And then when he was hyped to come to be a call-up in September, it jumped like the $3,400. And then the kid was actually meddled in not having respect for veterans in the locker room.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually botched him actually making the debut. The card went down like under $1,000. Then he actually had the injury, the Tommy John surgery. When that happened, the card dropped like $15, something like that. And then he had the other injury, and last time I saw the card, it was like $2, something like that. Here's where there is a grave issue with that model of business. How much do you think the most valuable card for Albert Pujols and Jose Altuve are?
I would. Which card is most valuable for them?
Yeah, like the most expensive one for them for the rookies.
I have no. I wouldn't even guess.
So the last time I checked was Thanksgiving last year.
Yeah, yeah.
For Pujols, it was 15,700.
Mm-hmm.
For Altuve, it was 8,400. And here's the thing: none of the two were classified in the MLB Top 100. Both of them actually had a remastered series that came out after the season in which they were included, but it doesn't classify them still
As
in
the
that
top
top 100.
100. Uh,
So that's why theirs doesn't have actually value to that same level. Because the thing is, they'll make the diamond edition.
mm-hmm.
That's the one that sold for trout like for almost $600,000. Then there's another tier that's a platinum, like 5, and it starts going down. It's like 5, 10, 15, 25, and 50, the tiers that they have. And obviously, the less that it actually comes out, the more valuable. Same thing with signings. He actually, again, he took me to school. I go like, oh my God, it must be so valuable to have like
Sign card.
a Nolan Bryan or Willie Mays. And you're like, nope. I'm like, what? What? Yeah, you'll get a couple $100 for them. When I was like, why? And he goes, because of the rarity of the signing is where the value is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
And he actually told me, it's like the less the player signs,
Mm.
the rarity is going to go up. Players that do a lot of fan conventions, they
Mm-hmm.
sign too much. So
They
it's
sit there
very
and just
easy to
sign all day.
it makes all the sense in the world. If it's
Mm-hmm.
much more rare, obviously it's going to be something that's going to actually make sense, that it's less it's less interesting because
Mm-hmm.
you have a lot of expose of where to get it from. So it's a very fascinating business. And again, it has a very stock market alike trend to it, if anything.
So yeah, you certainly take care of things, and I'm glad to hear that you kept your
Oh,
cards
yeah.
because I think it's a good investment. I think I got rid of mine many years ago for very
I want to go to the point of eventually and this time would have been as good as anything, but I've been sloppy in that. I do have it very well taken care of, and and everything, but like he has multiple places like hanging them up and like
Hmm.
super nice presentation. I need to get to that point eventually, but that's if anything wish list.
There's also, because you mentioned you were late at the beginning of our interview, but the reason you were late was because you were bringing a rescue animal to the veterinarian.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that speaks to your willingness to take care of things, and from the young age of learning, when you don't have much, take care of what you have.
Yeah, that's something very valuable in my life as far as animals. I've always been very, very connected to animals. I ironically, the first interaction that I remember was both with fish. We had a fish tank,
Hmm.
but the very first one was with a lizard that just pretty much like showed up. I remember naming him for whatever reason Pepe, him or her. So yeah, that was my kickoff, if anything, with animals. But I've always been very receptive to animals. I strongly think that the way people should see it is that they're living beings, just like us, and they deserve as much as a chance of us deserving in a great life as do they. And that has been something that during this time, especially in the very initial first months, I was able to do so much of animal rescuing, and the family has grown much more here.
How many animals do you have in your home now? Or what was the peak?
Mm. It's tough to know, like the head count, because it always
If you say
changes.
that, yeah, yeah. I mean, for
It's
you to
always
say it's
ever
hard to know.
changing. So
I mean,
I do
more
have
than one.
notation because I always have to keep track of everything.
Yeah.
Because I have both the ones that live here and the ones that are in transit for me placing them for adoption. So I would actually have to check, but there's a lot. There's a lot. Thankfully, there's the space for it, but there is a lot of them.
So back
So
into you and your
it's very
career.
normal for you to actually be walking here and find whatever.
I think it's great, and I think it speaks to your willingness to take care of things, and you've
Yeah.
learned that from your mom. And so, when you're turning into a teenager, did you find yourself continuing just doing some side things, or did you find work in your teens?
I was always doing something. I packed bags. I worked at ice cream shops, restaurants, translating, call centers. Like I had as many things that you can actually do. I always wanted to be both productive and get busy on something.
How were you doing in school at this time?
I was and always have been academically very good, but one of the things that I actually had to face was that stemming mostly from that issue with the very bad relationship with my father, I really, really developed a very, very bad attitude.
Mm.
So when you're smart and you don't know how to be smart, that can actually be a very bad combination. So I remember, and hi to the New York Public Library system. I hope this is something they have changed today. I don't know how many curse I actually threw at them that day, but a lot of F bombs were actually presented. I got prohibited from taking out books from the New York Public Library because I had multiple infractions of how many books you can actually take out
Hmm.
in different parameters of time. And they told me, we're sorry, but now you actually are penalized. You can't take books for what was it, like 3 months or whatever.
You were
And again,
taking out too many books.
and, and I told them, I was like, listen, you stupid piece of beep, 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 and several F bombs. You're telling a kid that he cannot further self educate himself because of some stupid rule that you actually have in place. rather than actually being worried that the kid actually, has an interest to self-educate. I found that so stupid. So stupid, It's like till this day, it's one of those things that you go like, uh,
Boggles your
who,
mind.
who actually put that in place?
Yeah.
I hope it's something that has changed. Well, I mean, then again, uh, libraries nowadays, with everything being so digitalized,
Yeah.
obviously don't carry as much as weight as back then. But yeah, I was always
Doing well.
I guess I got into the genes from my dad. He
Hmm.
was an avid reader himself.
Hmm.
So I was always very ahead of the curve. And in the combination of the bad attitude I actually grew up for, oh, that was not good because like I really had a problem with authority. And like if I didn't have it in for the teacher, and I didn't have the best answers possible. So discipline, which is it's very ironic because I'm super disciplined nowadays. Also, another thing I actually uh, learned from my dad. Uh, it, I it was tough. Like I really had a hard time whenever a teacher,
Hmm.
if it really didn't actually
Someone in
make sense to me,
authority.
it was like,
Hmm.
no, and it was tough. It was really tough in that regard. So academically, never a problem, but from that very, very important perspective of respecting, of being disciplined, and not being so full of yourself just because you already know what you're being taught, it was quite challenging. I wouldn't have wanted to be my teacher Eddie, for that alone.
Or the librarian. When
Oh,
did you?
no, I don't feel bad for the librarian. Like honestly, no. It's like, that part was solely on them for having that dumb rule in
Rule.
place.
Yeah, it seems a little odd to, unless you weren't bringing them back. But if you're bringing them
No,
back,
I was always bringing them back. It's just that they even they wrote me down the infraction.
here's your ticket.
And I told them, I was like, "You stupid dork! I mean, you just wrote me down an infraction. I mean, am I driving or something?" It's like, what is this? And it was very detailed. It's like, you took more books than we allow in 6 months, 3 months, weeks, and I was like, I was like, are you gonna throw me in jail for
You needed
taking?
to go grab your buddy and say, "Hey, I need to get me some of these books out." Like start a little illegal operation.
So smart, but never thought of that. Indeed. Then again, the other kids were not as enthusiastic as
Mhm.
myself of reading, and I think I'm very happy with saying I actually had time for everything. That was great. I mean, I need some of that time loop of back then,
Mhm.
because the days apparently today they're not as long as they used to be. But I did everything. It was like I read a bunch,
Mm.
I played a bunch, I was very pretty much a great relationship with my mother, everything, and the whole 9 yards, and the family and whatnot. I had time for everything. I really don't. I always say that when I hear the kids, "Oh, it was either one thing," and it's like, "Oh, no." It's like you were limiting yourself. There
Yeah.
is time for everything when you're a kid.
Did you start to focus in on like, because I know that you went to university, so
Yeah.
was there something directing you to, I'm going to start doing something in particular? Did you start to have or did you have a dream from a young age that you wanted to be something? When did your focus kind of start to funnel into?
Well, you know, I want to say I went much more to college because of my parents than because of myself, and I stay in very firm with that opinion still to nowadays. I think the education system, unfortunately, worldwide,
Mm,
very overrated,
mm-hmm,
and it's very much phased out from what it should be. I find it hard unless you're doing something in the medical field.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Well, fundamentally the medical field, if anything, or architecture or whatnot. So many other careers that you really justify that. Do you really have to go to college for that? More, I mean, you could self-teach, and how much of a difference is it really going to be?
Mm.
I think it's gotten to a point where, in many cases, just to pretty much take the U.S. for an example, there's how many instances in which colleges are just, oh wait, so and so is from Yale or this and that, but it's like, well, we also have the scandal going on, pending trials and whatnot for all those very rich parents that actually bought their education out to the kids. Sure, that what a brilliant person that's going to be, you
Poor
know.
Becky. Becky's such a disappointment.
On Becky Full House, right?
Becky.
Yeah, you know, I had such a crush on her when
But
I was a kid.
then again, as we said at the beginning, you put ourselves in her shoes, hopefully not high heels. Um, we might find
Oh, no
ourselves doing
idea.
the same thing, right?
I don't think so,
Oh,
because
oh no, you go against the whole
no,
thing. You never know.
no, because the
You know.
problem is in this particular case, like I've always thought that if you don't sweat it, you don't value it.
Mhm.
And when you put things so easily in this case, it's unfair, obviously, to everyone else. And at the same time, you're not giving time for someone to appreciate
Mhm.
what they're actually grasping themselves into. How are they going to value something you just like, oh, here you go, silver plate. So in that particular case, like, oh no, no, no.
It would be nice to
Besides
know
that,
her
they're jumping.
story. It'd be nice to know her story, right? Like, I don't know her daughter, but her daughter was somewhat famous or something herself on YouTube, and
Oh,
just to
really?
know the dynamics of, yeah, she had, I think, a huge following. The dynamics of the relationship, and how, because I see here in Korea, or many, you mentioned the States or Canada or what have you,
Uh huh.
is a lot of children run the house, right? So whatever the kid wants, unlike, maybe where you were, right?
Well,
Like if the kids
yeah,
are, whatever I say goes, and then
yeah,
the
that's
parents are
great.
just following along, and the kid's like, well, I want to go to this one, mommy. Well,
Right.
your grades aren't that good. But mommy,
Yeah.
I want to go to this one. And then mommy wants to do what she can to,
Right.
I mean, it would be interesting to know the story behind it, because it's not just as simple as my daughter wants to go here, here's the money. There's more, some missteps along the way that led them into that. It wasn't just, there was probably other instances where, she
Well,
followed her
I,
daughter's whims.
I mean, also it comes into play that so many people have to understand just because you have money, it doesn't mean that you actually have to feel that you can get away with anything.
Yeah.
That entitlement that actually comes along the way, that's something that should be like totally erased.
Well, that's the same
Very
thing you're
erased.
saying with university, right? The unfortunate thing, I don't have any problem with school and having teachers and students. The issue is people who don't go to school. I mean, the issue is people who go to school, if they have that, vanity or
Right.
arrogance of I went to school, or the people who don't go to school say, oh, well, I don't feel as good because I didn't do what they did. I think that's the part that hinders people the most. People feel that they're less than someone that went to university, or the people who went to university feel that they're more than those that didn't. No, you just have a different path and just do your job well,
Right.
mind your business.
You know, it's one of those things. Like I find it again very hard, and again, I'm speaking from a very particular stance because I've
Yep.
I've always been very strong into being empiric in life. It's very valuable. So when the problem is, and I don't want to pretty much dump on the teachers itself. It's
Mm.
not solely their problem.
Mm.
It's the education systems in general. They really need an upgrade for them, in my perspective, to actually be of any legitimate value added to your life.
Mhm.
It's very tough, and I struggle to see. It's like, okay, that's a very nice pensum, and very nice this, very nice campus, and all this and that. But what are you really going to give me that's going to be so valuable in life? And if at the end of the day, the value that university is going to give you is that you're going to be able to say, oh wait, I went here, and that's actually going to leapfrog you in a working position, you're still not going to be the best qualified candidate for that. So it's a very flawed system, and it's also connected even to working environment. It's like, 'cause it's like someone that's hiring should actually take that into consideration also in the evaluation, not that their eyes actually go, oh, this person is from Harvard. It's like, oh, okay, they're from Harvard, but they need to be equally evaluated
Mm-hmm.
to the same person that maybe went to community college, if anything, is
Mm-hmm.
applying for the position. Because the person who went to community college might be 1,000 times better in so many ways. So that's a problem. And I was recently conversing with someone in that regard. I was like, finance should be something that is actually taught to kids very early on in school. Very early on, it should be something. In
Absolutely.
so many other aspects, it's like even sexual orientation. Another thing that should also, it's like we have to drop both the taboos and the unnecessary and focus much more on the functionality of life and how that's going to translate in importance for the daily living and usage of proper. And we're only as good for society as efficient we are in contributing positively to it. So, what is the focus we have? Uh, it's tough. I find it very difficult, with certain exceptions of a few careers, to actually justify just college just because.
Yeah, I think you're right, and you had a motivation more from your parents, probably wanting that American life better,
Right.
to do
Yeah.
better than
Like.
they did, or something along those lines. And that's kind of, I see that as an unnecessary pressure put on kids. Just,
Yeah.
oh, because that's better than I had. Well, not necessarily, right? It may not be.
Right.
So.
Yeah, and it's like in the case of both of them, they actually did get their education later on when the things actually
Hmm.
improved economically and whatnot, and but it's like, yeah, they did it, but still, like I never felt there was like one of those things that it was like, oh, great, yeah, that's my thing too. No, and to be honest, like in college, academically, like I was terribly bored.
Yeah.
It was like, what are you giving me that is going to be really of help in my career? It's like, oh, no, 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 I'm not finding anything. And that was the story of it. I mean, I had a lot of fun that I won't deny, but academically, like I can't tell you that there was one too many things that I was thrilled by or that I took in my career, and they have been like stepping stones. Like, no,
What
no,
did
no.
you take in college? And
I did
what was the reason why you took it?
BA Gem MC of journalism and mass communication.
So was there a reason, like, were you thinking then this is what you want to get into? And was there a reason behind that? Did you meet somebody in communication or journalism?
So again, I always had the inspiration and was very solid into sports knowledge itself in general. So it really was a constant. Well, uh, I have a passion for this very strongly since I'm a kid. So how do I put this to work? I wasn't originally going to start my first career in that, but the closest friend I ever had in life actually gave me that extra push. We were drunk into next Monday, uh, almost at sunrise at after a friend's birthday, and it was the well, we're now sober kind of conversation. He told me straight up. I mean, why are you having doubt and wanting to study something else? Just go for this, and
Hmm.
like try and actually make it in that life. That's really what you want. Why should you not? And yeah, and of course it was a very very heated advice from him, which I thank him thankfully, because it might have marked the difference to a certain degree. Maybe I would actually found my way eventually anyways, but it wasn't originally the first path that I actually had in mind. I was actually going to incur in business initially,
Hmm.
and he actually gave me that push. I thank him for eternity on that, and it's been pretty good. It's been very, very good. I have only the best to actually say. I'm very fortunate that I was able to start very small and pretty much craft my way.
So out of college, how did you step along the way?
So one of the things I did was pretty much I've always been very, very, very active, and I really didn't want to go into that whole, oh yeah, I'm going to do an internship, which I find post college or when you're about to finish whatever internships to be so dumb. It's like, oh, so you have to go through the whole cycle and then you can actually have a small exposure onto how you maybe might get work. Like, no, I'm gonna actually find my way and into working. I'm not gonna do this
Hmm.
dumb process of 4 years later I'm gonna no. I started working hand on hand, of course, very small roles, uh, as you would expect, and I pretty much was doing both at the same time and
What type
escalated
of
my way through it. By the time I actually graduated to college, it was a different perspective in my life because I was already in the process of actually being a name that was making some sounds, which is
Okay.
different to, okay, I finished. Okay, now I'm going to do it. No, 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 no. An internship, again, it, being post college or close when you're finishing, that's something else that it's like, ah, why? Why? Why?
What were some of those roles that you had? So that those were preparing you for your career. So
So very small roles in small stations, radio and TV
so
and
sports
newspapers.
broadcasting in particular.
Yes. Fortunately, I one of the things when you're having to claw is precisely you get to do any and every role, any
Claw.
and
Did
every
you say
role.
claw?
Claw your way, yeah.
Yeah.
Like
No, it's good. It's a good one. No, no, yeah. So
speaking
did
of
you
that,
go ahead?
uh, I've heard there's supposedly I think that's a beer name. Which yeah, that's just the name. I've heard it so many times, and
The
you can see
claw.
how great I am. As much money as I actually made from recycling beer cans, that shows you how little I actually consume beer.
So when did you start to get traction with your clawing? When did it become so at this time, or is this your total source of income, or were you doing something on the side as well?
Well, very initially, I was making very low money,
Yeah.
so uh, I was doing this. I was doing college, and additionally, I was also working both at one point in a bank institution and then in a call center,
Hmm.
uh, which uh, I didn't last like too long on those.
Hmm.
And yeah, like those were pretty much like the go get side jobs additionally that I actually have to actually make ends meet in the
Yeah.
combination of those initial times, if anything.
So as you were working the side jobs and clawing your way up the ladder
Yeah,
with the cat in the background,
there he is.
right?
Goku.
Was your passion growing to be a sports commentator? Was this like, okay, this is really what I want to do and nothing's going to stop me? Did you have that determination?
Yeah. I always knew I had it in me, and my friend's push was, if anything, the as much as I needed to
Mhm.
have no absolute doubt that I could actually crush it.
What was your big break?
So, ah, hmm.
I mean, you look back, it doesn't look, it's a whole bunch of breaks, but what was the thing like, oh, yeah.
Mm, ah, um, I think there's two ways to see it.
Hmm.
I guess there's like the perceived big break that obviously people can actually say, well, yeah, that was a break. And I think there's also the big break that you actually feel yourself as a
Hmm.
professional.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I think those not always are hand on hand.
Yeah.
Because like if you would ask me, I would tell you that hmm, probably, probably. like I want to say around year 5.
Mm-hmm.
That's really when the break actually started, if anything.
How long
But
ago was year 5?
year 5 would have been 2011.
Okay, so just 9 years ago or so.
Yeah. But I want to say at the same time that I think that year 7, 2013,
Mm-hmm.
that's when I personally felt the big break really, really like fully stepped in. That everything was pretty much like coordinated in any single way.
So what were these two instances in 2011, 2013 that culminated your career?
Well, 2011, it was pretty much the getting the whole NBA Finals, World Series, and Super Bowl experience, like all at the same time, and additionally also the Olympic level games.
So you're physically at these sporting events during these times
Yes.
doing play-by-play in Spanish and English? Are you doing both?
I started play by play back in '09, and the first, ironically, I even lived next to old Yankee Stadium at one point. Ironically, the first World Series I actually had was Yankees Phillies. So, but yeah, like a fair amount of the times, yes, physically at the events. Not always, because
Mm-hmm.
obviously, as we know, networks sometimes actually get
Yeah.
budgeting cost, or stations, whatever. They'll do an amount, yes, present, depending on the relevance of the event. Others, not so much.
Yeah.
But that year, being able to actually grasp all of that and be there, definitely that's a different soak in, as far as, oh, wait, I'm kind of like grabbing steam. And at the same time, the coverage level and everything, and you start being perceived differently.
Mm-hmm.
So my 2011 to 2012, you could definitely feel a different approach from when you were actually being dealt with. It's like, oh, okay, the kid has it. Okay, okay, let's see what else he can actually build off on. But yeah, like I think that I felt that same thing, but fully for me in 2013, and much of it was pretty much. I think from an emotional perspective, being able to finally have a growing relationship with my father,
Mm-hmm.
ironically, to all this, I think that some nuggets of advice he actually gave me, plus the good sentiment of finally having that good relationship, or at least building towards it, it made me feel so much more entrusted, especially because of the fact that I know that this was something that he himself wanted to do, but
Mm-hmm.
he blocked himself from doing. So, if anything, that was an extra push. And I already felt I had the tools working and everything, which I did. And again, I've always been about my craft. So I think just a combination of everything, and if you actually, like in any other product in life, if you craft it and you craft it, you will get to that point where it develops significantly. And it's easy to see a developed product, but it's better when you actually see what actually made it get there.
Mm.
I remember at one point being in one of the booths of a stadium, and there was a veteran that told me, I was sitting down in one of the booths, and he told me, I never forget it till this day, and I reminded him in case he actually had forgotten years later, because he told me, have a good experience in that seat, because that's the closest you're ever going to get to actually calling a play-by-play in a stadium of any sorts. Oh, what an idiot. Yeah. Yeah. Of course, my response was, Yeah, I'm very, very, very fundamental to respect and discipline, but you get what you give out. So I gave him a middle finger, of course, and I told him, watch and see. And in the meantime, you can actually grab these two friends and go ahead and do as you please. Bye bye.
What's the reasoning, do you think, behind his remark? Is there a lot of competition in broad? I mean, there must be. I mean,
Oh,
is
yeah.
is he feeling, oh, this new up and coming guy, it might, take over, or he knew someone that might want a position like you have, like backstabbing and stuff like that goes on, or is it just a little healthy competition, a little jab?
Like in any walk of life,
Yeah.
like in any walk of life, you're gonna get a lot of backstabbing. You're gonna get a lot of this and that and blah blah. So I think that our industry, a lot of times people actually see, and it's like I tell anyone, it's like I'm even being like yourself. It's like you see me in a cafe or something. Well, not so much nowadays, pandemic era,
Hmm.
but like I'm just a regular jack like yourself that happens to work in something that's public. But aside from that, like everything else, we face the same circumstances that you would get in any other industry. So yeah, that is present there. I think that unfortunately, in any line of business, you sometimes get some veterans that if they see a sparked up, energetic, knows that he's good kid, they'll just try and bring him down. And
Mm.
there's a difference between arrogance and pretty much self-knowing your value. And
Mm.
I've never hindered away from admitting that I know I'm good and I'm very good. I don't believe that actually steps in any line of being humble and whatnot. It's just knowing your value. Now, if I would be to use in an arrogant way, then I would tell you, okay, that's bad. But
Hmm.
there's no shame or wrongfulness in you admitting the value you actually have. And I think in any walk of life, people immediately jump to that judgment. Oh, you're arrogant. It's like, no. And yeah, like I feel that there was a certain amount of veterans that they got rubbed the wrong way just because of that. 'Cause I've always been in any circle that I've been very secure of myself
What
because
is your
again,
title?
I know I can
What
back
is
it up.
what is your title? What would you call yourself? Because I know
Uh,
on your bio it says MMA broadcasting or commentator, but is that
right. Well, I would say straight up sports journalist and broadcaster would probably be the most fit into that because I've done so much of both. It's been always hand to hand in both aspects of it.
what does it take to hone your craft? For you to be as good as you say you are, and I have no doubt that you are good. What does it take for a sports broadcaster, commentator to be good?
Like in any walk of life, if you want to sell fruit and you want to be the best at it, you actually have to take notes on what can actually get you there. And the same thing for any type of industry. You really, really have to be willing to be the best critic to yourself. Maybe not as much as I am. Like I'm one that I take any minute detail that I didn't like from what I actually said. I'll take it down. Like, no, no, no. You could have actually
Hmm.
done this and that, and it's sometimes things that people will not notice or don't care enough to notice or don't have the eye to notice. But you should. You
Hmm.
should. You always have to be vigilant because, indeed, if you want to be very good, it's like you're not going to have Tinkerbell just come up and boom, you're great. No, that's not going to happen. Peter Pan, great, okay, but no, not in the real world. So it becomes one of those things that you have to go day by day in it. And if you start humble and you end humble, well, that's much more power and credit to you because that's the best thing in life. One of the things that gives me much more happiness is the fact that I get along with the person that's here in the bottom, and I get along with the person that's here in the top, and there is no difference because it's human beings. That's how I see it. I think that one thing social media should actually be of understandings of people is that we're meant to actually be social, and we're meant to be properly treated because we're human
Mm,
beings. And in the process of that, you never know the better advices that are going to help you grow, where they're going to come from. In fact, like I've been very happy and blessed that I've worked with a very good core of professionals throughout my career, thankfully, in very high levels. So you get a lot of advice from that, but you always have to be open to receiving much more of that advice from any average Jack.
mhm, mhm.
I can't tell you how many times that I've actually been told feedback from some fans, and I'm like, "Hmm, you know, that actually makes sense." But if you actually go into, oh no, I'm a public figure, man, you're closing up yourself from an opportunity of continuously honing your craft. You always need to be smart, humble, respectful, disciplined, the best critic. It's a day and day in, day out, day in, day out. Every day, if you're breathing, you have a chance to actually be better, not only in
Mm,
your profession, in anything in life. You can be
mm,
a better parent, you can be a better brother,
mhm.
cousin, whatever. It's there's always a chance for improvement. I think the sticking point is, do you want to get better? Are you afraid to get better? There's a lot of people that actually have fears even to getting better. They go, they fear whatever reason, it's
Mm.
like there's people that don't have the energy in them to get better. There's so many cases, but it all revolves in the same.
Do
If
you
it can improve, you should do it.
so do you go back and listen to the sports commentary that you've done on a particular event? And
Yeah.
also, how much time do you spend, you know, watching sports news, paying attention to the stats and all of those things outside of, maybe you'd have game day prep, I guess, of whoever, if
Right.
there's a fight or something, just knowing particular what you're doing. But how
Right.
much time do you do through the week, through your life, of knowing everything about sports? How much is that, maybe even a challenge, because you might
Mhm.
find the temptation because it never ends. I mean, now you have
Right.
a little slowdown, you might be able to catch up, but it's like trying to catch
Right.
some water out of a fire hose.
Like in my case, since I've been pretty much so through and through multiple sports, it becomes even much more complex because
Hmm.
now you're not looking at, oh, wait, the guy, he only has this sport and he's specialized in. It's like, oh, no, in my case, it's pretty much all around. So the preparation has its own thing. Now, am I going to tell you that I know even what so and so actually had for breakfast today because I'm that soaked in on everything? No, not really. You do have to do your process of investigation, of being informed and all that. But there's something and I gave this advice to a young up and coming play-by-play. He told me, "Oh, I was just offered this, but I don't know a thing about these athletes." And I was like, "Okay, but you do know about that sport?" Like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "Great. Do you want to miss out on that opportunity?" No, but I don't know about the athletes that are going to be involved. Like, well, I'm gonna tell you something. You have a following dilemma. You know about the sport. That's already a great advantage.
Hmm.
The only thing you have to do is do your investigation, lay in about these athletes,
Hmm.
and compliment it there. If you actually go ahead and you mess up on something, well, you know what? Welcome. Even the ones that have been doing it the longest of time
Mm.
are going to commit mistakes. Don't be afraid of it. Now, if you would tell me, well, I don't have knowledge of that sport in particular, I would like, well, buddy, you're probably going to have a tough time on that. You can still take the opportunity, but you have to evaluate, is that going to be counterproductive for the follow up of your career? It's
Mm.
easier to have the knowledge and fundamentals of the sport and just doing a complimentary investigation for event, which we have the production meetings, we have the
Mm.
pre-production, the packages, everything. Yeah, do your thing. And I'm one that I'll be very thorough, even in the athletes that obviously are going to be your much more mainstream. I'll still actually take a look through those packages and see if there's something else that maybe is an extra. Because hey, let me give you an example. Like take an MMA card. I've done MMA cards that sometimes have been 8 hours. As a play-by-play, you never have enough information that something's going to be extra.
Mm-hmm.
You need always as much as you can actually have in, because you got to pick your moments
Mm.
on when to actually throw it in. So a good memory is always great. A good memory is very much fortified by a lot of reading also,
Mm.
mind you. Like I told you, avid reader always. So that's kind of the thing. It's like in anything in life, if you want to accomplish something, do you just want to be middle of the line? Do you want to be very good? Do you want to be excellent? Do you want, what is it that you want to be? You have to put the time in. You have to put the effort. And you got to forget about everything else. There's always going to be naysayers. There's always going to be people on your side. You decide which one are you. Now, if you're not on your side, oh, you're in a load of trouble.
And there's
You
a
are
lot
in a
of people
load
who
of
aren't.
trouble.
There's a lot
And,
of people who are not.
yeah, like I said a few minutes ago, there's a lot of people that self-block. And if you're self-blocking, it's like, no, it's not going to walk like that. Probably not going to walk.
What's most difficult about your job, Christian?
Hmm. That's I guess it depends on I think that's a very individual question because I mean, I guess you're gonna have people that are gonna tell you the travel, the
Mm.
preparation, this and that. Mm, the thing is, like, I want to say probably again my perspective.
Yeah.
I think for a lot of people, probably is the whole thing of walking on eggshells. That a lot of times, and especially in this business, you're actually going to get it a lot.
Mm.
And sometimes that can actually put another block to your stepping stone. I think that's one. Sometimes there are some businesses that have not evolved through the passing of times. It's like that applies for anything in life. Like I remember earlier during this pandemic, I was watching the news, the local news, and I actually had to go myself and check in because I couldn't believe it. The unemployment webpage for Florida looks like something bought up from Windows 95 or something. I was like, what? And again, when I saw it in the news, I was like, what? No, I mean, is this true? And I actually went ahead and I saw the website. I'm like, oh, it is true. So there's a lot of outdate, and I think that sometimes, like take Major League Baseball for one, there's people that need to evolve to the point of understanding that their decision making times for the profits of the business is past time. I am not surprised in any shape or form that MLB, out of the main sports in the US, has been the one actually facing all this chaos with the pandemic.
I honestly don't understand baseball in the sense that if I was to turn on the TV or whatever we do now, we don't turn on TVs, do we? But
Right.
to look at a game during the regular season and hardly anyone is in the stands until maybe if your team gets in. I mean, there's some teams that have a good fan base, but these players, I have no problem with the money they make personally.
Right.
Sure, someone's going to pay it. Go ahead.
Right.
But
Good for them.
how do they build that out with hardly any ticket sales for many years at a time?
And
So,
that's one of the things I found very interesting about this short season.
mhm,
And I hope, and like some, in a way, I feel like my I hope feels like a passionate thing, much more than realistic, that they actually consider reducing the season, because the problem is, and again, like, don't get me wrong, when I was a kid, before getting into the business, I didn't see that way necessarily. It was
mhm,
like, but there's two aspects to it. One, I was not in the business yet, so I didn't have that perspective of what I'm actually going to get into. And the second is also, when I was growing up, baseball actually had stars.
yeah.
It actually had stars. So I would take as much baseball as you would get. But then again, back then you had, at least in every team, no less than two stars that
Mm,
everyone wanted to go and see and pay a ticket for.
mhm,
Can you say the same today? Oh, no, you cannot. You cannot. So the issue on hand is, when the season is so long, there gets a point where, I'm sorry, but why do the games matter? It's like, okay, yeah, oh, they lost, they were swept in this series by so and so. It's like, oh, great, they only have like 100 games left, so golly gee, that's going to be so determinant. It's like, there's too much games. It's an
And then it
exorbitant amount of games.
finished the season at 500, and they did
There's no
well,
right. It's like there's no relevance into the
Mhm,
games because there's too many of them. If like what we were talking with the whole signature thing for the memorabilia, if there is so many games, how are you going to ask someone to become engaged with your product
mhm,
if the team is still going to have like a million more chances of doing something?
mhm,
So the engagement, it's tough. It's very tough, and especially, it's like the season begins right after the Super Bowl. They start their training, right? Whoa, 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 whoa. And then it ends up with football halfway and the NBA a few weeks in. Everything
mhm,
else passes right in the middle. And it's like, of course, people can actually feel disenfranchised, especially having so many options. Like, I would love for baseball to become popular again and not regional. I mean, yeah, you tell MLB and they're, oh, no, no, it's very popular. It's like, yeah, the decrease, it's real, but okay, yeah, whatever you say. It's a regional sport nowadays, unfortunately. And I almost cried when a couple of months ago I actually saw the numbers in, and even MLS jumped them in the demos of 18 to 34. It's
So
like,
your issue is
what?
the antiquity of how, so where you're walking on eggshells is how they do things in an older manner, and it's not up to date. And for you being a younger guy in this industry, you probably want to, suggest, or you just wish the people that were in the
Right.
know or who made the decisions would just kind of update themselves, and that makes it difficult for you wanting to
Right.
make the sports better for the
Yeah,
public.
like, obviously nowadays, I have had much more road to walk, and I've established my career. But coming up and being creative and wanting to be on, like the innovative wave and stuff, and it was tough because a lot of
Mhm,
times you run into people that they don't even want to give you time of day. They're just stuck on their ways, and they're not acknowledging the fact that their ways are outdated, and it
mhm,
hurts the business. And it's like, hey, it's like we got to modernize. And it's only great for the business if you actually see a different perspective. But if you just see a kid that has good ideas, and you flush them out, and I'm talking not only in my particular case when I was coming up, but I'm talking in general. In any case, it's like, if you just dish out the idea and not even give them time of day, it's like you're gonna miss out on something that's prospectively a good chance to improve your business. And if you're not working towards efficiency and you just want to stay stuck in your times, well, we know what evolution actually brings along the line.
Christian, what do you enjoy about your work? What are some things that bring you excitement and joy, maybe even a highlight of your career in your young career so far?
Well, you know, uh, I I'm gonna try and use the cliche, the eternal cliche. If you're doing what you love, you're not working,
Mm-hmm.
which is a cliche, but yeah, let's throw it in there. I genuinely have a very big passion for sports that intrinsically translates directly when I'm working to a very high degree. It's like my excitement level is always present there. I really live the fact of I'm doing this and I love this. So that on its own serves as a motor, serves as everything that you really need. And I think for anything you do in life, it really should be that you actually are inclined to that if you really want to have that extra to give that actually comes out. I'm not gonna lie, my favorite aspect from the career is the play by play. I think there's a different level into it as far as wow, it's the excitement level you can actually get to, especially in I would say one advantage I have in the fact of doing both the Spanish and English market is that I've done a good job of actually condensing both and taking elements that work in one and taking it to the other, adding my take into it. Originality should always actually be a factor. And if anything, one of the things that I do that is not so pretty much like key element in the English market, but yes, a lot of times in the Spanish market, the drama aspect that you actually need to take into.
Mm-hmm.
I hope that eventually that's something actually comes much more into it because it's much more needed. Like sometimes,
Mm-hmm.
like I put myself in the seat of the other person. It's like if the play-by-play guy sounds dry, even in
Yeah.
his main call, it's like "Hmm, you're not going to engage someone like that,
Mm-hmm.
buddy." So that's something I've always appreciated that the Spanish market. Of course, there are instances in which the drama. You just have to know the level you can actually go into it because if you go too dramatic, it's like there's going to be a disconnect. So, like in anything, you have to know what dosage you actually give into it. But the sheer excitement that you actually get from a play-by-play is wonderful. Picking out a single moment, it's tough because there's been so many, thankfully. But I think, I think that possibly, hmm, I want to say the 2013 World Baseball Classic, U.S. versus Dominican Republic in Miami.
Mm-hmm.
The game in which DR knocked out the U.S. That game, that game, it was challenging, I must
Yeah.
say. Because the atmosphere that was there in Marlins Park, the amount of Dominicans flooding and just in the culture in there,
Yeah.
it was a very challenging game to actually stay put professional
Mm-hmm.
and not let emotions take over.
Get
Because
caught up in the moment and you're
it's tough. I mean, if you would actually see down, and I saw down from our cabin, I was like, this is like if I would be in the Dominican stadium. It's like, it was, I don't know how many Dominicans were there. I think
yeah.
it was like, poof, any amount. I forget the amount, but it was a lot, and it was very visible.
Mm.
So the noise, everything, it was tough really calling that game. It was very challenging not to slip in a biased standpoint.
Mm-hmm.
So it challenged me so great. I mean, it wasn't the finals. No, it was not. But as far as peak emotion for me, that felt like it. I mean, you're going against the U.S., it's like the standard, if anything.
Mm-hmm.
And being that Kimbrel Ibar at bat, I was like, wow, it's the emotions that actually went through that was something. And again, it wasn't a championship moment, but symbolically in so many ways, it's like it was. It, it's one of those things that my emotions were running so high, and at the same time, like, my eternal challenge. You got to stay unbiased. You got to stay unbiased. As much as you would want, like, oh, yeah, we did. Like, no. So I felt very, very, very challenged, but comfortable at the same time, because I was demanding myself to stay on my element as much as I did not want to, obviously.
I could
So
think
that
that
was a
for
great moment.
many of the sports that you do, there is that temptation to be like, yeah, like, if an MMA fight or something, or some guy misses some easy shot in the NBA and then you bump. Wait, no. You got to stay in your lane. You got to,
Um, well, like, hmm. I mean, it just depends. Like in my
Mhm.
case, I think the patriotic aspect of it had a lot to do in that
Yeah.
regard.
Yeah.
From the challenge standpoint, the thing is, like, for me to connect with an athlete, as far as my likeness towards their game, there's not been like so many,
Yeah.
so many, and I think that's where the issues can come. Like, for one, I enjoyed Sammy Sosa a lot. Oof, terribly. Who wouldn't? The guy was a showman. But Mark McGwire was my favorite slugger.
Mm.
And the guy, you could actually say a wormhole for charisma. But I liked him. It was like, I even used a bat stance like him. So, it's like, I never got to do anything in regards to Big Mac, but I remember running an interview with him, a full feature. Uh, I couldn't but actually tell him, I was like, listen, after the interview, I was like, like, you're full on my favorite slugger all time.
Mm.
And he actually told me, you're great at your job and stuff. I feel so happy. And I felt like a kid. I was like,
Yeah.
wow. But again, like, I wanted so much to actually say it on air, but like, no, you got to keep your
Yeah.
tracks into it. So I can see where that can be a challenge if you have some engagement towards that. But I can tell you, like, I haven't had the instance really,
Mhm.
aside from that World Baseball Classic. And it might be one of those things that maybe when you're a kid and additionally being in the industry, you maybe manage it better. Because the thing is, like, LeBron James, probably the best player in history, uh, but I enjoyed more Michael Jordan's game.
Mm.
Uh, it's like, it's one of the. I mean, like, I think there's a lot of overrate factor with Michael Jordan and whatnot, but the guy, he played in a way that was fire. LeBron, again, I think he's the best, but he's so fundamental in his play a lot of times, that when he actually gets on fire, it's like, oh, you're alive, great. You're not being a Boy Scout necessarily or whatnot. So that's one thing. But in this day and age, like, I see some of the players like Luka Doncic. That kid, oof, that kid is fire. That's a very entertaining kid to actually watch. Uh, Nikola Jokic, he's good, but he doesn't have that energy level that you would get with Luka. But it's tough. Like, I tell you, like, from that kid alike level of engagement,
Mhm.
it's not the same. And I guess I created so much of a blocking for me to actually stay unbiased that it comes much tougher nowadays for me to actually have that level.
Kristen,
So
thinking of when you were a kid,
yeah,
coming from Dominican at 8,
yeah.
selling some juice on the side, grabbing some bottles from your neighbors, working your way up and getting some good advice, some sound advice to do what you want.
Yeah,
And then the struggles all along, by having this job or that,
Yeah.
working in the industry you wanted to part way or clawing your way up. What
Yeah.
advice do you have for people without the job, the kid that you were, the
Mhm.
one in between jobs, or the one discouraged about going to work because
Yeah.
they're just not feeling it today? What advice do you offer?
Well, when I was starting out, I was living pretty much in a rented room that I barely had space to for my things at most, you know. But I think there's two approaches you can actually have in your mind. It's like, do you want to progress or do you want to stay in the same stone you're at today? It's all the approach you actually have. If you have a goal, and I return to what I was telling you, knowing that you're good and not compromising that with arrogance and staying humble. Know your goal, work for it. It ain't gonna be easy by no means. But if you always know from day one that you want to pretty much continue striving, you're going to get there eventually. But you have to take in all the proper efforts. You got to be pretty much in a concerted approach that if you actually don't wing it in the proper way, there's a good chance you're not going to make it
Mm,
to the levels that you might aspire. And you have to be realistic about the approach you actually want to have.
yeah.
One thing that, and I return to the emotional aspect of it. I was very fortunate to have a lot of close people that actually gave me good advice. Not necessarily only family, but friends as well that were all as family, truly. And sadly, I lost in the span of very short time. I lost so many that it was sad because it felt like to a point like, oh wow, I'm doing this next step, and I would like this person to actually see that what they deposited in me was there. And there's two ways to see it. Are you going to actually throw yourself down, or are you actually going to motivate yourself through that and strive ahead and boom, continue and on to the next? And it's tough. I mean, we don't want to lose people
Mm,
by no means, but if the loss actually comes, you really have to continue striving through it. And I think like when my dad died back in 2016, I was scheduled to call the first round of the playoffs of MLB, and obviously I jumped through that. And the following week, I actually returned to work for the start of the American League Championship Series, and it was very tough. I remember that at the end of the call when we were doing the post game, I couldn't hold it anymore, and I ended up crying. And when we were almost rounding out the post game, it was tough because like the first the Indians were involved, and that was one of the first two teams when I saw a World Series the first time with my dad was the Marlins and the Indians in '97. So the elements in there, they were tough, and same like that, like other people that I did lose. It's tough, but again, it returns to the same thing. How are you going to boost yourself towards the goal you actually want to accomplish? Do you have faith in yourself and whatever creed you actually might have? But you have to have it in yourself as well. And stem from that you're going to do everything you want, everything you need, that if you have still breathe in your lungs, you can continue. The game ain't over till you actually say it's going to be over. You have to want it that bad, that good, however you want to phrase it, great, however it works for you. Do it with dignity. If it has to be the longer way, great, then do it like that. But always sweat for it. Leave your last effort in it. Never compromise dignity. Dignity is too strong. of a value to compromise. It's better to take longer, but to do it properly than the other way around. You will remember this always, always. Do it the right way. The right way is always better.
Cristian, you're a wise young man.
I do my best,
How can people
I,
find you?
uh, that would be at Cristian Moreno D, no H, and a D as in dog in the end. See what I did there? But
You
yeah, man, I'll quote the Dark Knight. Great trilogy indeed with Christian Bale. When Michael Caine actually tells Christian Bale's character, Alfred the Bruce, you should be a genius by now, or something like that. You got to do a lot of mistakes, but hey, if you learn from them and you can actually craft and grow from them, great, awesome. It's always great to actually be a revisionist of yourself. Don't let anyone else be better than you on that, because if you do, you're failing yourself and everyone that is actually attached to you.
Great advice, Cristian. Do you have anything coming up? Do you have any shows coming up in the near future that's
So
kind of
we're
COVID
kind of like
exclusive?
in slow-mo mode
Yeah.
right now with everything revamping up and all the complications with this.
Hmm.
But obviously, through social media, you can always actually be very active and what we actually might have next and whatnot. I thank you so much for the interview. And again, even though obviously this is available on demand, but I did actually arrive late, as I told you. So thank you for kindly waiting there for me.
You were rescuing animals.
Yeah.
Okay, I had no choice. Like, what do you mean? I wait all day?
Yeah. What comeback do you have there?
Really? I have one final question for you, Cristian.
Yeah.
Why do you work?
Because I like it, because it dignifies, because I have a mission, I have a passion, and because I want to be a good influence. Because as much as I actually feel good about myself when I'm working, I also feel good about entertaining people. Because if you give me of your time to actually listen to a broadcast, whatever type of broadcast, or read a material of mine or whatnot, you're giving me your time, your precious time, the one thing you can actually give back, both time and death, or in this case, life, and you're giving it to me. So I want to be thankful to you of that, and I want to give you only the A game back, both because it's what makes me happy, but also because I want to give you an entertaining and informative experience that is worthwhile, that is worth commemorance to you, that can make and shape a difference to you, to whoever in your descendants, to the inspiration proper, to that light of energy, a spark of a laugh, of whatever that can actually make your day. I think that we have a in the sports entertainment industry, like in the entertainment industry in general, we do have a very valuable commitment to fulfilling that experience that actually people have and give us of their time. And we should only give the A game. It's very nice to be in the public figure, this and that, but I think it all comes back to being thankful. Remember where you came from and use that to actually boost yourself into providing for those people. And you never know who you're going to impact and in the way you're going to impact. Now, it's up to you to do a proper impact. You can do it. It just deserves on that. And I'm very romantic in the approach, but I do think that we can be a better world. It's just pretty much putting the building blocks. If we don't start doing it, it ain't gonna happen. And I think the reflection of the times that we live in should be a strong reminder, but nonetheless one that actually portrays the way for us to improving as a society in general in the world.
Cristian, you make me want to learn Spanish.
Well, you should. It's
Yes,
a
I
wonderful one.
should. Cristian Moreno, thank you very kindly, sir. You're a wise young man.
Thank you, Brian, indeed, for the invitation. Let's be in touch. And anytime, more than welcome. Thank you, man.
Thank you very much. Talk to you later.